anything that has to do with construction. So my instance of accidents, I had the privilege of being a safety manager for a very large construction company for a couple of years. I found it one of the most worthwhile things I ever did. When you can keep someone from hurting, someone losing work time, someone losing income, thereby affecting their family, you've got something very important. So that's a very important part of it. You may wonder why it's thrown in here, but it's because it's important. Everything we do out there, and everything we will be doing. So, Robert. Some of you may have been in Bob's class before. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Joe, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm happy to be here this morning and dealing with something that's, I'm sure, important to to everyone in one sense or another, whether you work in the industry or supervise in the industry or own a company in the industry, work for a city. Any involvement in the workplace, it involves safety, of course, as most of you know, because of the risk of injury, workers' compensation costs, OSHA-related citations, those type things. Generally, if when I do safety related topics for LTAP, and no matter what the class is, and I start off by asking, what's the most important thing in your workplace? And I get pretty much a standard answer. And what do you think that answer would be? Safety, sure. Just about everybody says safety to a person. And I find that interesting in that, and this is something I put on the on a Word document. Matter of fact, last night, and I hope that most of you in the back can read this. And of course, all the topics that have been discussed the last 2 days are extremely important, because that's why you're here, is about payments, and that's how to preserve your payments, how to preserve your tax dollars, how to give your community, your county, your city a better program, those type things, how to educate yourself better in the methods available. And of course, most of you are probably saying, yeah, Bob, what's your point? Well, my point is that projects are designed with the end result being a new facility or improvement in a system, with all the design considerations being concerned with system improvement. Wouldn't you agree? It's about system improvement. All the hundreds of thousands of pages of design and material specifications deal with inanimate objects, for example. Didn't do a spell check on that, but that's... So would you agree with that? In your bid specs, how many pages of those bid specs deal with design of the project, type of materials, compaction, those type things? We're generally concerned with, if we're talking about in this OSTEP program, this 2-day program, we're dealing with pavements. We're concerned with, and I've heard terms that have been familiar throughout the years to me, because that's the industry that I worked in for most of the years. We owned a asphalt and a construction, or a concrete plant, and I was in charge of the construction division, sewers, water lines, those type things. And I was also involved with some paving projects. So all of those terms and everything that I hear today and yesterday sound fairly familiar, except for some of the new technologies that I'm not real familiar with. But we hear things like asphalt, concrete, aggregate hardness, gradation, AC content, subgrade compaction, pavement cracks, spalding, dowels, crack sealing, drainage, ASTM specs, and many other recognized technical boards who approve things. ASME, MSHA, or NIOSH, I should say, not MSHA, NIOSH. So what do we do about the human side of the project? Safety of the workers and the traveling public, for example, on construction projects. And of course, Eric Morse yesterday said, build them right to begin with. Well, just about every slide that was used, I could use as part of a safety program. And I'm going to show you what I mean in a few minutes. Does assume come to mind? How many of you, and if you'd be honest with me, and the camera can't see you, how many of you would assume that when you hire a contractor for a project or let a project out for bid, that the contractor is going to comply with all the state, federal regulations, EPA guidelines, OSHA, all those type things? And most of you raise your hands because most of you are folks who work with cities or counties. Some of you are suppliers and didn't raise your hand. But that's the point of the assume. And just about every bid document I've looked at since forever has had about a one-liner in there for safety. And that one-liner is, the contractor shall comply with all state, federal regulations, et cetera, including sometimes, if we're dealing with roadway projects, including OMUTCD, Ohio Manual Uniform Traffic Control Devices. In some cases, they'll be as specific as saying Section 7. Wow, what a concept, right? So I guess the thing that concerns me is, if safety is the most important part of a project, including the finished product, if it is in fact, then why don't we put the same effort in the safety specifications as we do it in everything else? The next time you let a project out for bid, or you hire a consulting engineer to design a project, tell them, geez, we want to treat safety the same way we do all the other specifications in this document. So in other words, you're going to tell the prospective bidders, we want it to be asphalt or concrete. I'm not making a preference here. We want it to be 4 inches thick, and we want it to go from station 0 plus 0 to station 5 plus 0, 0, or 50 plus 0, 0, and we want it to be 24 feet wide. And that's it. That's all you give them. Well, they all know it's hot mix asphalt. They all know that we want a base underneath it. They all know that we want a leveling course. They all know that we want a finished product. Now, would that make sense to you? Absolutely not. That makes about as much sense as the residents want you to make water run uphill. So I guess the point is then, if we considered what we really wanted from a contractor as part of the project, and we reviewed some of those items, and for example, you say, well, how are we going to do that? And the thing I get generally from most cities and most counties that I deal with, and I do work for sometimes, is they tell me, or in classroom sessions, is they say, we can't tell the contractor how to bid the project. That's their problem. That's not ours. Do you believe that's so? If you have an accident in a work zone, for example, would you think that would be so? That it's going to be totally contractor responsibility when it comes to a lawsuit? No, absolutely not. chances are 99% of the time you're going to be involved in that lawsuit if that's the case. So some of the things that we look at, of course, is can be compared to your pavement maintenance program or pavement management system. Reactive maintenance. And someone mentioned that yesterday. Well, when a pothole develops or a pavement fails, we have reactive maintenance. Well, when an accident happens in a workplace, we have reactive safety. It's something, you know, after the fact we're going to do something. One-time treatment. Well, one-time treatment for pavement, and a lot of folks think that it's going to last forever, and we all know that it isn't. Pavement systems are designed to last X number of years, depending on traffic count, volume, type of traffic, etc. Well, it's the same thing with safety program. You know, a lot of folks that I deal with and talk about safety and talk about, for example, work zone training, and that's what I'm going to refer mostly to this morning because we're talking about pavement management systems and a lot of folks working out on the roadway, of course, and I ask about their work zone training, traffic control training, and it's, oh yeah, we had our guys go to one of those last year. And apparently that's all we need, is since they went to one of those last year, that's it. Now, would you think that's true? And I compare it to a lot of other things and a lot of other aspects of training in the workplace, even in life, you know, for example. And I'm sure that a lot of you play golf. I play as much golf as I can, and I'm sure a lot of you play golf, right? A lot of you probably play tennis, and probably a fair amount of you bowl. And the comparison I make there is, did you go out one time and play golf and now you're good? Did you go play tennis one time and now you're good? Did you go do anything else and now you're good? Well, it's the same thing with safety. We can draw a parallel between all of these things, between reactive maintenance, one-time treatment, between preventative maintenance, all these things. And I could, if George would let me use his graph, I could put some of those same graphs up there and show you a parallel between some of those things. So it's not just a, yes, we did it last year, or yes, the contractor knows that, but we need to have some specifics, okay? And some of those are, and here is a, and we probably, probably should have included these in the packet, but that's not that big a deal. If you would just pass those down, please, George. Thank you. Yeah, just pass those down. So here is for example, a program or something, a document that you could modify and include in your bid specifications. So how do we do it? We put it in our bid specs, what we expect in the project, how we expect the contractor to conduct themselves, how we select the contractor. So some of the things I look at when I do audits and write programs for contractors, for cities, for counties, is I look at what they have at the existing. Thanks, George. I look at some of the existing things in place, and what I find, or if I go out, and sometimes construction managers hire me to go out and look at a project and do a safety audit on a project for them. And I recently did one of those in an area down by Tuttle Crossing, and wrote a report. And it just so happened, though, that an OSHA inspector was out there the week before the construction manager called me. OSHA showed up. So now the construction manager calls me and said, OSHA showed up. We want you to tell us what we need to fix before he comes back and writes the citations. And unfortunately, that's the mindset of a lot of contractors, a lot of cities, a lot of government agencies. And it's boilerplate stuff. It's, oh yeah, we have one of those. I asked to see it, and they have, in some cases, thousands of pages of documentation of things that mean absolutely nothing. Mean absolutely nothing. So what you have to look at is, do you have a boilerplate safety program? And in some of those cases, now don't get me wrong, we're not going to reinvent the wheel about everything. That's not the idea here. But we're also not going to just rubber stamp everything. So does the quality of your project meet the same rigid standards as the grass seed that you're going to spec on a project? How many of you ever seen specs for seeding and mulching on a project? Most of you? And what's involved in those specs for seeding and mulching? I've seen specifications for seeding and mulching that has been more detailed than the safety program. And yet, folks will tell me, well, the most important thing on this project is safety. And I say, wait a minute. Something doesn't make sense here. And generally it doesn't. And of course, the cost to human beings, you know, the suffering, the pain, the loss, not to mention the loss of wages, but it's tremendous when someone is injured on a project. And of course, second and thirdly, it's costly to you all, to every one of us. Not just you, but to me. I pay workers' compensation costs. I pay insurance. I have errors and omissions insurance. I pay all those costs just like everyone else. They might not be quite as much as some contractors because I'm in a different SIC code, Standard Industrial Classification. So mine are lower. But I do pay rates, and we all do, and they're going to be costly. So if you're that concerned about safety, the next time you design a project, just tell the prospective bidders where the project starts, where it ends, a summary of what's desired, and tell them to follow all state and federal requirements. They can go down and look up, they can get specs for 404, they can get specs for 304, they can just tell them that and do that the same way as you do your safety program. You'll save yourself a lot of money, because we all know that we want lowest and best bidder, right? Do those belong in the same sentence? Lowest and best bidder? No, they really don't. So this handout that I passed out is one that I did for a city, and I really did mean to take the city name out in the first sentence there, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it's public information. But at any rate, this is something that you all could adapt to your work situation, to a project. And there's some general boilerplate requirements in here. You know, it's kind of a CYA thing under the general requirements that all work performed by the contractor shall meet all the specifications for safety and health as defined in this document, as well as federal, state, and local standards for all safety and health. And of course, we want to keep that in there. And of course, we want to tell the contractor that it's their responsibility to perform the work, including the material, training, or equipment necessary to meet the standards. And of course, we want to determine if the contractor is in compliance. And we're going to do that based on the training of our inspectors. Okay? So one of the key words that's not in here, of course, is inspectors. And I've been on a lot of projects doing safety audits where they've had a construction inspector on a project who doesn't have a clue about safety. The only thing, the closest thing they know about safety is this is a hard hat area, and the construction workers are supposed to have hard hats on, and that's pretty much about the extent of it. Their concern is if it's a sewer project, where the taps go, make sure we get the right station so we don't miss a house, those type things. Make sure they have the proper materials. Make sure that they have the proper pipe, gravel, compaction, those type things. Unfortunately, some of those folks lack the training and skills needed to do a construction safety inspection. So you need to work on that. You need to think about that. But after your inspector or whoever you have designated on that project, construction manager, whoever it is, after that person is trained and you get out to a project and you say, well, geez, this contractor, we've told them and told them and told them, and they just won't do what we say. There's a couple of key things you can do. Now, we all hate to do this, and I would not call OSHA on anyone except in a life and death situation, or if I was an inspector on a project and I couldn't get the contractor to come around and do what they were supposed to do. But in the bold print here, in about the third paragraph down, it says the contractor shall correct any unsafe conditions immediately, or the inspector will take pictures of the unsafe condition and call the nearest Federal Department of Labor office, OSHA. Now, you want to get some contractor's attention, there's two ways: calling OSHA and holding up payments on the project. Those are the two key ways. But we don't want to do that. That's the last thing we want to do. What we really want to do is have these documents available, and when we advertise for bid, a project for bid, is we want to make sure that it is mandatory that the contractors, prospective bidders, attend the pre-bid conference. Pre-bid conference, not pre-construction, pre-bid. That's going to come later. So that we're going to explain all the things required in this project. And some of those things up the top there, you notice it says Contractor Safety Policy and Traffic Control Plan, TCP, and I put that in there specifically because this is a pavement management program, and we're working out on a roadway rather than off on some building site and so on. So we're going to have need for compliance with the Section 7 of the OMUTCD. So we're going to make sure that the contractor understands that 14 days prior to construction, the contractor shall submit a written safety program for the review by the city or the township or the county. Upon review, any revisions required will be submitted within 7 days at a minimum. This written safety program is to address the following. And of course, the agency, this doesn't necessarily have to be city, but the agency reserves the right to request any documentation ensuring proper safety program is being conducted in accordance with the written program and applicable rules and regulations. So what do we mean by that? Well, this contractor submits some boilerplate safety program. Oh yeah, we got one of those. Take it over there. Well, okay, it depends on what this project is. And I'm sure that most of you are familiar with OSHA and some OSHA terms. And how many of you are familiar with the term competent person as in the OSHA standards? As in 1926, 650. A couple of you raise your hand. Competent person. That's one of the key elements we're going to want to have on this project, whether it's an excavation project, and most people think of, when they hear competent person, they think of excavation and trenching. And that's true. But it applies in many other OSHA standards. And competent person there's a definition in the standards. When I say that in a lot of training classes, when I do work for a lot of cities, I get a lot of chuckling from employees. Oh, we don't have none of those here. Making some jokes about it. But it is a term in the standards. It's one who is capable of recognizing unsafe, hazardous conditions in the workplace or surroundings, has the authority to take action about those unsafe conditions. So recognition of unsafe conditions in the workplace, and has the authority to change something. That's what we're going to want to have on the project. We're going to have some other things in there too. We're going to have some stipulations about who can't be that competent person. Because the standard is, oh yeah, our superintendent, he's the guy that's... No, we're not. The superintendent is not going to be the competent person on the project. If it were me specing the safety on the project. Because there's a lot of reasons. Ohio Turnpike Commission. Anybody in here deal with the Ohio Turnpike Commission? On a turnpike, the superintendent cannot be the safety officer. and for good reason. Generally, superintendents are concerned with production. Now, we're all concerned with production. We got to make a profit. That's what we're in business for. We're not going to make a profit at the expense of safety. And again, because a lot of folks think that safety is just all common sense. Everything is common sense. And if we think that, you can look at that word assume up there. And you all know what the word assume really means. And if you think common sense is what safety is about, then you better take another look at it. Now, I wouldn't disagree that there shouldn't be some common sense in safety. And if you look at the OSHA standards, if you read them, you're going to find that a lot of that is common sense. You know, for example, it states that you can't put an employee in a trench that's deeper than 5 feet without trench protection. Shoring the slopes, trench box, sloping the banks. You say, well, geez, that's just common sense. I wouldn't want to get in there and get covered up. Yeah, it is. It's just common sense. So there's a lot of things in there that's just common sense that no one does, though, is the problem. So we're going to request documentation that contractor has a competent person, trained competent person on the project, who that person is, the name of that person who's going to be on that project for the duration of the project. Depending on the project, if it were an excavation or trenching, for example, we might want to have proof of documentation of everyone on that project has gone through excavation and trenching training, where it was, when it was, who did the training, and so on. We want to see certification of that. Okay, so you want to get rid of those boilerplate, oh yeah, we got one of those, 5,000 pages of a safety manual that nothing happens. This is how to do it. So the contractor shall report the man hours of all personnel employed on the project, as well as all recorded and lost time incidents on a monthly basis in conjunction with monthly pay estimates. So we're going to request some of these things in conjunction with pay estimates if they want to get paid. How many of you are not in a drug and alcohol testing program, your employees? Just about everybody in here, right? So you all know, and again, some of you may be suppliers and this may not apply to, but those of you who work for townships and cities and counties, et cetera, you all know that federal law was passed a few years ago, 1996, that all employers with employees in safety-sensitive positions, safety-sensitive positions is CDL drivers, 26,001 pound or greater, mechanics, people who load, unload, people who dispatch trucks. So there's a wide range there of safety-sensitive positions. Have to be in a drug and alcohol testing program where 25% is tested for alcohol, 50% for drugs throughout the year. In other words, spread out through the year. So if you have to do that, wouldn't you want your contractor to be in a drug and alcohol testing program? So you put that in there. And you have a right to see those, not the person's name. Now, those are confidential medical records. You're not going to be able to see those, and you shouldn't want to see those. But you want to be assured that contractor has a drug and alcohol testing program and that the employees are being fairly tested. Because believe me, I have talked with contractors, and I had a friend who worked for a contractor who said, oh man, that's a tough one, Bobby. That's a really tough one. You know what? I didn't realize it was that bad. But apparently some companies have a bigger problem than others in that area. And we certainly don't want someone who's impaired. Alcohol is a legal beverage, but there are certain requirements for drinking alcohol when you're working. Minimum you can't drink alcohol 4 hours prior to performing a safety-sensitive position, for example. Unless it's a prescription drug, it's probably an illegal drug. And sometimes even prescription drugs shouldn't be taken when you're operating heavy equipment, cranes, backhoes, pavers, dump trucks, etc. So anyway, we want to make sure that the contractor has a drug and alcohol testing program, of course, and some other things that we may want to include in there. Now, most of you have probably at least been involved in some ODOT project. Is that correct? and have seen bid specs for ODOT, plans and specs for ODOT projects. And in that ODOT project, have you seen a traffic control plan in that project? Have you ever seen a state bid project, unless it's been years and years ago, without a traffic control plan in it? No. We see traffic control plans in just about every ODOT project. And they're going to tell you what, when, where, how. We all know why, but they're going to tell you all those things, and it's going to be spelled out. And so, you know, we want to have the same thing. Now, do we have to do that for every project? If our consulting engineer is drawing up the project, do we have to do that? Well, one way or another, we have to have that. But we can have the contractor submit a traffic control plan for a project. You might say, well, geez, this is only going to be a chip and seal project that's a mile long and so on. We're going to have to draw up some elaborate traffic control plan. You got to have a traffic control plan every time your employees go out to work in the roadway. I don't care what they're doing. And it might be something as simple as a verbal 5-minute discussion with employees about exactly how they're going to do that. It could be sending a crew out to chip brush for some limbs that have fallen down. You're going to send a truck, a couple of guys out to chip brush. Well, we don't need a traffic control plan for that. Oh, yes, you do, and you should have. There have been a lot of people killed and injured in incidents where they're only going to be out there for 15 minutes, a half hour, an hour, a couple hours, a half a day. And there was a fellow recently killed in a city in northeast Ohio in that exact situation. Went out to chip brush for a tree that they had cut down a couple of days before that. Residential street, city street, we know that the speed limit isn't greater than 35 miles an hour, not supposed to be. Kid in the car came up, hit the one guy, cut his legs off, crushed him, killed him. He was 2 houses away from where he lived. Traffic control plan, it's important for everything. So what I'd like to get you thinking about is not only your employees out there working, but when you hire a contractor, you want to make sure you have specifics in there. And again, I get so frustrated with this standard one paragraph about safety, and then we'll have volumes and volumes and volumes about what kind of material we're going to have. We want submittals. We want submittals for pipe. We want submittals for dowel bar. But yet safety, it's, well, follow all those state and federal regulations, and we're done with that. We can't tell the contractor how to do their job. It's fairly frustrating. It really is, especially then when you see accidents occur. And somebody calls and they want an investigation done, and of course what it comes down to now, unfortunately, is everything's litigation. Everybody's hiring an attorney for everything, and if you're doing everything you possibly can, sometimes it isn't enough. But if you do nothing at all or do that boilerplate thing, believe me, you could have a real problem there, and you could get somebody injured. So these things are about prevention too. This is preventative maintenance. Believe me, it really is. So some of the other things you can include there. You say, well, how do we know if the contractor's good? How do we know if it's a safe contractor? There's things that you can ask for without violating privacy acts, and of course this one isn't in there. But for those of you who deal with workers' compensation. For example, employee modification rates. Employee modification rate is the actual loss divided by the expected loss. We all have one of those. We all have an EMR. If you're an employer, you pay workers' comp, you've got an EMR. And it might depend on the standard industry classification you're in. But for example, and generally, if the EMR is higher than 1, then you got a contractor with some problems. He has higher than usual injury and illness rates. And I'm going to include illness on that because that's what it is. And just a little example here. If we had a contract, you say, well, this isn't important. What difference does that make? What difference do you think it would make if you've got a contractor who's paying over $500,000 in workers' comp costs? Now that comes right out of profits, those payments, versus a contractor who's paying about $200,000. We got $400,000 difference there in the same contractor that does the same work. So where's he going to make that money up at? That $400,000 he's losing to pay workers' comp that's coming out of profits. He's probably going to make it up on your project someplace, on some shortcut. Where else do you make up profits? So if we had a contractor with a $3 million payroll and his EMR is 0.60, his workers' comp cost is going to be $270,000. Now that's a sizable amount of money. But for a $3 million payroll, it isn't all that exorbitant. Versus if we have another contractor who has a high number of accident injury rates, same $3 million payroll. His EMR is 1.50. He's going to be paying $675,000 in workers' comp costs. Where's he going to make up that loss? That profit he's not making. We're all in business to make profit. The safer contractor makes more profit, does a better job, gives you a quality product, gives you a better product, believe me. So where's he going to make up that profit or loss? Probably on a project someplace, probably on cutting corners someplace. And now I should have turned this sideways because we kind of ran out of room here. Number of incidents, our incidence rates. You know, this is a standard for those of you who are involved in workers' comp. Number of incidents times 200,000 hours divided by the number of hours worked is going to give you incidence rate. The national average is, for recordable, is 9.9, and lost work days is 4.5. So what do? You ask for, you put in those bid specs, you put in here that the contractor shall submit along with their safety plan, their traffic control plan, their competent person training certification. They shall also submit their EMR and their OSHA 200 log for the last 5 years. How many of you know what an OSHA 200 log is? Just a couple of folks? Every employer who has 10 or more employees is required by the federal government to keep an OSHA 200 log. It's recordable injuries and illnesses other than first aid in the workplace. So that's where we get this. Okay, Bureau of Labor Statistics. So if they submit their OSHA 200 log, and again, we're not violating anybody's confidentiality, because a lot of you might have contractors say, oh, I can't do that, those are medical records. Those are not medical records. All they have to do is if there's a name on there, all they have to do is cut that portion off and submit those OSHA 200 logs, because an OSHA 200 log is a 5-year document. So in other words, if I was injured let's say I was injured in 1999, had an arm injury from work, 1999, and tomorrow I go to work and I re-injure the same recurrence of that injury, same injury. Okay, not a new injury. The employer has to go back to the 1998 log and make an adjustment on that log. So it's not a new injury. So it's a 5-year document showing, it's a paper trail showing what's occurred in that workplace over the last 5 years. So right there is going to tell you if you got a safe contractor or not. You might put something in there like, for example, a contractor with an EMR higher than 1.25 is disqualified from bidding the project. There's a lot of ways to get a safe contractor on a project, unless you just want lowest and best bid. If that's your goal, lowest and best. And we all know that the two are not in the same sentence, or shouldn't be in the same sentence. So you can ask for equipment available for this project. What it is, a list of it. For example, inspection reports. Do they do a regular inspection of that equipment? You know, daily inspections for trucks, for example. You might want to ask for just some spot checks of those things, because if the equipment isn't inspected, then you're going to have some unsafe equipment on the project. So would you think it was okay? You know, George talked about some of those new technologies and the expense of some of those paving processes and you know, the quality result of that, the end result of that process. Would you want a contractor out there who's got a fuel leak on a truck, who's leaking some diesel fuel right ahead of that paver? Is that okay? Hydraulic leak, all those type things. You know, I still see some guys work for cities who are using diesel fuel to clean their tools, clean their lutes and their rakes and their, you know, all those kinds of things. I mean, so if we're looking at, you know, I equate safety to quality. I don't think you can separate the two. And yes, we need all those pages and pages of bid specs and documents. Don't get me wrong. But I think we need to do a better job when it comes to safety specifications. We need to spell out what we want of the contractor. And believe me, in the long run, you're going to get a better job. You're going to get a better quality job. You're not going to have somebody out there taking shortcuts trying to make up that X number of dollars on it. And that's just workers' comp there. That doesn't include all the other insurance costs, et cetera. How about fatalities in the last 5 years? Wouldn't you think that's fairly important? It's going to be on those OSHA 200 logs. Major property damage, those type things. You might want to request those things. So all these things are going to add up to a quality job, believe me. So some of the other things in that health and safety and environmental requirements, because we can't forget the EPA. And some folks, you know, again, it's kind of assumed. It's kind of a brush all those things off. What would happen? What are the consequences of? And some of you, I know some of you are involved in this stormwater phase 2 stuff that just went into effect. What would happen if you had a contractor that spilled 26 gallons of diesel fuel or hydraulic fuel or petroleum products in the ditch on your project as you're working? Take some sand, throw it down, clean it up, throw it in the truck? What's the consequences of that? Anybody know? What are you supposed to do? Spill greater than 25 gallons of petroleum products. Call the EPA. Absolutely. So, you know, a lot of times your inspector on a project may not even know that. If it gets into a waterway, if it's a gallon and it gets into a waterway, what the EPA considers a navigable waterway, and what would you think that would be, a navigable waterway? Pardon? Just about. You're pretty close. It's anything that gets into a navigable waterway. So a ditch? Sure. Storm sewer? Absolutely. So, I mean, technically, you're supposed to make that call. So, I mean, if you have a contractor out there who doesn't care about the environment, who doesn't care about people, who doesn't care about quality, what kind of job do you think you're going to get? That's right. That's the kind of job you're going to get too. So there's a lot of reasons for this. You know, a lot of folks look at me as a safety consultant as, oh yeah, well, yeah, okay. So what do? You tell us we need a hard hat on when we're out there? We know that. You know, that's about the kind of attitude I get sometimes. And a lot of it is lack of education about what's required and about how you can make things better. So, you know, again, there's a list in here of some other things that a copy of the program must be submitted to the agency prior to award of the contract at a minimum. And you can, I mean, these are just some recommendations. You might remove things, you might add things. The contractor's safety and health program must address the following. New employee orientation program. Wouldn't you think that would be important? When you guys hire a new employee, your county, your city guys, your township guys, say, okay, got a CDL? Okay, getting that, it's snowing, get in that truck and go plow. Here's your route. Here's your route. Look at this route and go out there and plow that snow. I hope none of you do that. But I mean, it's about the same thing if you don't have an employee orientation and training program. I mean, you put somebody in a dangerous piece of equipment, you put them on a dangerous job, And that dangerous job might be flagging traffic. Now, I've heard a couple of folks say, and just recently, and I'm not going to mention anybody, any city or anything else, but had a couple of people mention that they'd have people hit by vehicles flagging traffic. And the two incidents I can think of, they were college students that the agency, the county or the city or whoever it was, had out there flagging traffic. College students. So now, can you imagine? You get a college student out there where, okay, here, take this flag, or it really shouldn't be a flag, but caught up in this thing. Stop, slow, paddle. Hopefully that's what you're using. And you go out there, okay, when I tell you, stop that traffic down there. Okay, you send them down there, and they get run over by a car, and they're a senior at Ohio State, and they're going to go into go to med school after that, and they've got a promising career in front of them, or they're going to be an engineer, and they got a promising career in front of them, and you get them severely injured, and now they're a paraplegic or something like. What do you think? I mean, what a tragedy to a young person's life, number one. But number two, how many millions of dollars do you think that's going to cost you? Because we didn't have time to train them because that was too expensive, and everybody knows that stuff. It's all common sense because we assumed that, right? The assume. And that's happened in two places. Unfortunately, it wasn't a severe injury, but it could have been. You know, if it's a near miss, then it could be a hit. So accident investigations. You need to investigate all accidents to find out what the root cause was. Find out if it's lack of training, if it's lack of proper equipment, if it's something else. This is what we want to determine. So if it's a near miss, say, geez, man, well, you better find out why you almost got something or other, whatever it was, because the next time it's probably going to be that something or other. And again, accident investigation. You know, I see these accident investigation forms from accidents, and I go in and I look at them in cities and all kinds of places, contractors. Oh yeah, employee was this, and they got their foot caught in the, and signed by the, and that's it. That's all there is to it. You think you're going to prevent another accident by doing something like that? Absolutely not. You got to look at the things that led to this thing. Just like a detective investigating a homicide or something like that. We want to find out everything we can about this. Had somebody mention something about they were driving through a city near here, and saw a pretty scary situation. Some of these guys here, you guys, were you telling me that? Yeah, Bob, or what could you just tell us what you saw coming through there?
No, it was Monday evening. It was dark, and they were widening the road. They had a pylon separating traffic, and then on the edge side that we were driving, they had barrels, but there were no signs to guide us through the maze of barrels. And at one point, we could have ended up going up against traffic on the left turn lane that was across through an intersection. So we couldn't. They didn't have it marked to get to the westbound lane.
Mm-hmm. So you almost ran into some head-on traffic there. And even though it's in a city and the speed limit should be low, we know that a lot of folks don't pay any attention to speed limits. And, you know, some of the common complaints I get is, I don't care how many signs you put up there, they don't pay any attention to them anyway. Folks, that is no excuse. That's not an excuse we can use. We have to do everything possible to make sure that we are complying with that Section 7, and we have to evaluate. We have to evaluate the traffic control plan. And there's one example, and I know where that city is, and I'm going to tell you right now, I talked with that city last year about that. And the answer I got was, oh yeah, we're pretty, yeah, our so-and-so handles that. Yeah, we're pretty good about that stuff. That's the answer I got. Then the next thing you hear is that somebody's getting sued for $2 million because of this, and this, and their answer is, I know people will sue you for anything. You know, there's an attorney waiting around every corner to sue you for something. Yes, there is. Yes, there is when you operate in that fashion, and a lot of folks do. So I would ask you to think about your own operation, your own city operation, county operation, township operation, and ask yourself, are you developing a traffic control plan for complicated projects? Are you having a pre-job meeting if you're just sending a crew of 2 people out there to work on a roadway? If it's a project, how much safety did you include in that project? And did you advertise a pre-bid, and did you make sure that all the contractors understand that? And believe me, folks, it's sometimes I get these comments about, and years ago, I mean, I remember when OSHA went into effect. That's how old I am. When he said 35 years, yeah, 35 years is just about it. I got out of the Marine Corps when I was 21, went to work on a survey crew, and then a construction company and so on. And I've been involved in that business, and I've seen it evolve. And I've heard, oh, well, we can't afford to do that. If we have to do that, you'll never get this project built. We can't afford to. We can't this and we can't that. And you can look back, you know, all the changes that we've had in everything in our lives. You know, would you really want to go back to living like it was? Well, maybe after, I shouldn't say that, but after recent events. But with like it was in the 50s, you know, you're using smudge pots out on the edge of the road, no seat belts in cars. You know, everything has evolved. And back, I suppose, when the automakers heard that they had to put seat belts in cars, it was, well, if we have to do this, we'll never sell another car. That's just too expensive. We can't afford that. So when it comes to safety, it seems like it's related to something we can't afford to do, unfortunately. And I look at it as it's something we can't afford not to do, one way or the other. Either you're going to get somebody injured, killed, or it's going to cost you a lot of money in a lawsuit. And generally, when we do those work zone traffic control classes, I hold up, at the beginning of the class, I hold up the green manual and say, do you know who owns more of these than any other profession? And most people know, yeah, attorneys. And yes, they do. And generally, when something happens, you know, somebody goes and hires the right attorney, who hires the right investigator, and it's real easy to find out. It's real easy to find out if you're doing it the way you should. Not only records, you know, all these records I've talked about, interviewing employees, you know, taking pictures of work zones, all those type things. So it's fairly easy to find some of those things out. So moving on with this, some of these recommendations then. On page 3 there, moving on to page 3 then, contractor's work product must meet all OSHA EPA DOT requirements as interpreted by the city of or whoever it is. And of course you reserve the right to inspect all work performed by the contractor as work progresses and prior to acceptance. Any deficiency shall be promptly corrected. So this is pretty standard. You probably have that in your specs anyway. The city reserves the right to qualify or disqualify any contractor from bidding or acceptance based on safety performance, and reserves the right to obtain information to be used in the qualification, including, not limited to, the OSHA 200 log, EMRs, and OSHA recordable injuries. Any contractor employee deemed unacceptable by the city shall be removed from the premise and shall be replaced by a competent, qualified employee acceptable to the city, et cetera, et cetera. So, competent person. We want a competent person on there. Medical treatment notification. If you have an accident on a project with an injury, you should have it in there that your agency is notified. And of course, if it's a fatality, you want to be notified immediately, and you want to call OSHA, because that's a requirement for 3 or more hospitalizations in the same workplace, or a fatality. You call OSHA within 8 hours, and you want to be notified immediately. You also want to be notified if the contractor has an OSHA inspection, and you might want a copy of that OSHA report, for example. And of course, safety meetings. You should have regular safety meetings, and the contractor should have weekly documented meetings with all employees signing in on the safety meeting sheet. And of course, your meetings with the contractor should be in conjunction with monthly meetings or progress meetings also. So you don't have to take a lot of time for these safety meetings. They can be done as part of the project. And of course, contractor safety representative should have specialized training in the area that they're working. And of course, you can put your own specific wording in there for that. This is just some recommendations. And of course, next we can't forget the subcontractor. If we have any subcontractors on the project, they have to comply with all of the requirements of the contractor. And for most of you, this doesn't apply, but for contractors, if the federal OSHA shows up and there's a subcontractor in violation, OSHA can, and in most cases does, cite the general contractor. So they cite all contractors with affected employees who could be injured by that unsafe condition. And then some special safety concerns and liability. And there's a one-liner in there about the use of tools and equipment, which you shouldn't be letting contractors do. But I know of a couple places, even a county I did some work for, who a contractor would come up and borrow their backhoe, take it down and work on a bridge project they had going. And I thought that was pretty unwise, to put it mildly, to let a contractor borrow somebody's equipment. You know, some injury occur there, and I mean, you're going to have a blanket thrown over everybody, including the manufacturer of the equipment. So then, of course, environmental requirements. Contractor must immediately report any environmental spill, release 25-gallon petroleum products spilled on the ground, or any amount spilled into a storm sanitary sewer or waterway. And of course, that requires calling the EPA. So there's some things that you need to have in there that could protect you, because if that should happen and you don't require that and the EPA shows up, I think most of you have probably had some dealings with the EPA, and you know that EPA doesn't distinguish. They don't care if it's a city, a county, a township, or an individual. Excuse me. They levy fines. And it could be you that's involved and named in that. And even if there's no consequences, there's no finding against you, it's still going to cost you time, supervisor's time, in investigation, documentation. You're going to have to call your law director. They're going to call other attorneys. It's going to cost you probably a chunk of money, even if there's no findings. And I'm sure that most of you are aware of that. So, you know, we also get involved in tort liabilities here also. And I don't know how many of you ever attended Mark Landing's class, LTAP class, but he's really good, and he enlightens everyone about responsibility in some of those areas. So I would like to just go through and show you a couple of examples here, and I've probably got hundreds of videos that I've taken around the state, different cities, county operations, contractors, and so on. And you know, again, none of us are perfect. We're all human beings. We all make mistakes, and we're never going to have a perfect project. But some of the things I see going on, I just scratch my head and I say, what? I just don't understand it. I don't understand why they would let some of these things go on, and sometimes just missing one small item can be really expensive. And of course, as we all know, work zones, perhaps the most dangerous place to work. So you should, number one, teach your employees how to set them up properly the first time, set them up, take them down properly, and make sure that your contractor has a traffic control plan and has trained employees and understands the importance of that and follows the traffic control plan. And of course, statistics. And George and every other speaker here has talked about the fact that most of our major highways in this country are constructed. Now it's maintenance, reconstruction, those type things. So I know you, along with the public and myself and everybody else, is sometimes frustrated by orange barrels, but it's a fact of life, and it's never going to go away. It's here to stay, because as our highways age, maintenance has to be done, and reconstruction in some cases. And of course, we place people at risk out there. And here are some statistics about the number of people killed. And over 800 people killed in work zones. And some of these considerations for work zones, and I know that maybe I can maximize, get this a little bit larger. Maybe you see it a little bit better, but consideration. I mean, some of the simplest things. For example, and this could be a rehab project, but in this case, it's some city workers, and they're doing some striping, some lane striping, and they go out and they do it the same way that as they were taught to do it, same way as they did it last year and the year before and the year before and 10 years ago in most cases, and no consideration for anything. And some of these things that you need to consider in your traffic control plan. And by the way, this is section 7 of the OMUTCD, and everyone should have one of these. Your employees should have one of these, and minimally you should take a look at this before you send a crew out to work and determine what they need to do to work safely and protect themselves and the traveling public before they get out there. And 7A5 of this manual specifically states that a traffic control plan shall be in place for all projects. So if you do have someone out there and there's an accident or something like that, all the attorney has to do is cite that 7A5 and say, did you do that? Well, no, we were only going to be out there for an hour and a half. We didn't have time to, and you're pretty much toast. So anyway, these are guidelines. Now, what I like to keep in mind is, and what just about everybody I know that teaches those work zone traffic control classes, including myself, is that is not a cookbook. Okay, there's not a recipe in there. Okay, we're going out here, so here's what we have to do: A, B, C, D, and add 2 cups of sugar. And this is a guideline. It shows you the proper type signs, proper shape, color. If you're placing them, some recommendations for placing distances. And again, not etched in stone, because some of those distances that you see in there, and I've heard a couple of folks say, well, geez, and these were contractors. One of them in particular, I know very well. He says, oh, my boss tells us when we go out there, we got to measure exactly from where we start. I take a measuring wheel, I measure back there, and I place that first sign, and so on. So I said to him, I says, well, what happens if that falls in the center of Kroger's parking lot? You got to put a sign there at their entrance? I don't think so. So he says, well, I don't know. I never thought about that. Well, apparently it's never happened or something. So again, that's an example. This is a guideline. It's not a cookbook. So you have to use a little bit of common sense. Common sense, yes. It applies to just about everything you do if you think about it and use it. But here, for example, there are parking spaces. Parking spaces there that should have been addressed prior to going out on this project. Because my Jeep is parked in one of those parking spaces, and I did that and got out and took the picture just to show what happens if traffic comes up and can't see, or if this were the other lane, and maybe they were restriping the turn lane, for example, and the same thing happened when they were restriping the turn lane. There was so need to place no parking signs, maybe some of those type things. So you need to consider existing signs. You need to consider traffic, traffic flow, traffic volume. Can truck traffic use this roadway? Are we going to have trucks, semis coming down this road and turning? And sometimes we have to consider pedestrian traffic, bicycle traffic. And for example, here's a semi that's getting ready to make a turn one way or the other. And in fact, between where this truck, the route he got off of, and here, this is actually a shortcut because there's no place for trucks to drop off materials in this area. You know, and it's a simple thing that could have been thought of ahead of time. Now, there was no problem here. There was no accidents, no injuries, or those type things. But if there was, now we'd go back to accident investigation and look at what contributed to it and what we need to do. I'm going to jump on down to about. I don't know how that silt link got in there. Okay, let's see. All right, this is in Columbus, and this was last winter. Signage is good. It's on a bridge project, and the contractor is a quality contractor, one of the best contractors around. Does quality work, has a good safety program. Okay, member of the OCA. Their safety person is on the safety committee with me. I'm on the OCA safety committee. And this isn't very far from where I live, and I just happened to look at this, and I videotape just about everything. And this is no exception. So I'm driving here, and I'm thinking, well, this is a great example of how a work zone should be set up. You know, they're informing the driver what's up ahead, what's going on, guiding the driver through and around the hazard as you're supposed to do, and so on. This is perfect. So whoops, I missed it. So I got up there and I saw this. Now, I'm traveling, of course, in this direction, and you can see traffic coming towards me, and we're divided by barrels. Everything looks fine, right? Is there anything wrong with this picture, would you think? Taking pictures while I'm driving. I knew that was coming. Actually, there's somebody behind me. They got the camera over my shoulder. it's attitude about how things are done. And most of you may not think there's anything wrong with this. See, I see someone shaking her head, yes?
I've been in construction for 28 years. Those cylinders aren't properly secured.
Those cylinders aren't properly secured. They're just sitting there, and they've got the gauges on the tanks. Now, if somebody would hit that vehicle from the front and those tanks fall over, folks, we could lose half our engineering students in Hitchcock Hall and anybody else around there. So, you know, again, safety is an attitude. It's about inspecting for unsafe conditions and making corrections. You know, I see all the time, and just recently I did work for a county, went out on a project that they were working on, doing an inspection with their bridge superintendent. And they had a truck out there, their bridge crew had a truck out there with the oxygen acetylene tank sitting on the back with the gauges on it they drove up on that project with. And so I informed them that, number one, you're not supposed to do that. Number two, I looked at the oxygen acetylene tanks, and one of the gauges were broken. You couldn't tell what the pressure was in the acetylene tank. Nothing wrong with that now, is there? So, and they looked at me. I mean, these employees kind of looked at me and snickered, because they've been doing this for 50 years. Nothing's ever happened. I said, you know what would happen if a tree branch fell or another vehicle hit you, you were in an accident with those tanks on the back like that? I said, you could kill a whole bunch of people, including yourself. So we look at projects, construction projects. You know, we're inspecting for these things that's in our policy, not that 1,000-page, oh yeah, we got one of them, rubber stamp things that they threw on your desk. Oh yeah, they're complying with that stuff. We told them to. You know, again, I know I'm probably beating a dead horse, but the next time either you send employees out on a project or you let a project out for bid and you have a contractor on a project, you want to make sure that you have the safest contractor you can get. And if you do, you're going to have the best quality job you can get. I can almost guarantee you. And of course, that's looking at it from the front, and it's fairly innocuous. You can't really see anything going on there, but the lighting isn't good. You know, the sun's at my back, and we've got we've got people on bicycles and so on, and a truck sitting there. So anyway, it's about job planning. A lot of it really is about job planning. Do. Joe, how am I doing? Okay? It's 12 noon. Okay, I'm done. I thought I had a few more minutes, but okay. I was going to show you some home videos that I've taken on job sites that you would not believe, but never mind. And I know why Joe put me in this spot here today, because last time I got to the cafeteria first and got my food first, and I was sitting there eating when he came in, and he looked at me and said, "This won't happen again." But really, the reason I did that was, this is going to stick in my mind forever. Down in Butler County, we had a safety program down there, an excavation and trenching class, and of course I was the last one as the instructor, last one in to eat. I got in there was nothing left. I think it was 2 or 3 beans left in the pan. I said, after this, I'm going to get to that line as quickly as possible.
Well, you're not, because George is going to ask you a question. He's here one of them.
Okay. Anybody have any? You know, again, this morning I was out there making notes, and Tate said, "Bob, this is kind of like when you take a test. You're not supposed to study right before the test." I said, "Well, I'm always making notes, so I kind of do things as I go along." So maybe if it didn't seem as formatted as it should, maybe that's because I was making notes as I was listening to George and some of these other folks talk, and I'm thinking, boy, I could use one of those graphs in the session I'm doing, you know, preventive maintenance and all those things. Any questions, comments? Yes, sir.
I heard on the way in this morning, the lost a man in White Patterson last night. They dropped a chunk of concrete on his crushed.
And you know, you hear that, and I'm not going to second guess anybody, but I wonder how those things can happen. You know, there was a company I worked with who's got one of the best safety records of any company around, and a good quality company. They do quality work, quality safety program. It was working down near Ironton, and was taking a crane apart. The master mechanic had been with the company 29 years. He was getting ready to retire. He was underneath the boom, and the pins on a crane, they knock outward. He was underneath the crane boom. He knocked the last pin out. The boom dropped on his chest and crushed him. The labor's standing there watching. Of course, the laborer doesn't know anything about it, and he's not going to tell a master mechanic how to do his job. But, you know, you have to be alert all the time. And if you're on a construction project, you got to pay attention to what's going on around you. Not just yourself, but other employees and the contractor. No matter what you're doing out there, it's dangerous.
Bob, one of the things that always has stuck in my mind, I was working a crew, and the guy kept talking about boy, there were ladies on the cruise or and it was under traffic, and I learned that you take the smartest person in your crew, and that's your flight. You make that person your flight. But I didn't do that. I took a guy that I suspected was pretty slow or a little dull, or not very anxious to jump in and do things, and I sent him down the road to be the flight, and he didn't got us all killed. And I mean, that's good.
You got to have intelligent people out there, no doubt about it. And we also have a standard class for and certification class for supervisors and employees. And this is, you know, it's based on this, but this is the course that we use to train your flaggers, your employees, your supervisors, etc. So make sure that all of your folks have training before you send them in out there. I put some cards on the table in the back. If anybody interested in calling me for any help, that's what I do. It's what I do for a living. And I'm not patting myself on the back, but I don't know anybody who knows more about construction safety than I do. And that goes with quality. So if I can help you in any way, give me a call. Be happy to, you know, if you have a question, I don't charge for answering questions. But
that's good, because George has a question while the rest of you go.